So we have some pretty interesting news that Boots Riley has endorsed Bernie Sanders. You might know Boots Riley from his music, but you likely know him from his 2018 dark comedy, Sorry to Bother You, which was predicated on examining how racial hierarchies and how capitalism work together to literally and figuratively dehumanize people in the movie. And while the movie had a surrealism to it, it was a very, very poignant critique of how capitalism works in our own world. And as such, the movie was widely acclaimed as a piece of art, but also as a piece of social commentary. But the endorsement doesn't just matter because Boots Riley is a well-known artist. It matters because of who Boots Riley is and the millions of people like him. Boots Riley notes that he's never voted for a candidate in his life, but he's making an exception for Bernie Sanders. That Bernie Sanders isn't the be-all end-all, but he is nonetheless the person that is helping to create a spark and perpetuate a spark that will unite working class and marginalized people across the United States and indeed the world to push for a better country and for a better world. The fact that Boots Riley is just one of many people from a variety of socioeconomic backgrounds that don't vote or that infrequently vote, yet are choosing to do so for Bernie Sanders, is emblematic of Bernie's strategy and how it could succeed. That Bernie isn't as focused on flipping Republican voters to Democrats, although I wouldn't count Bernie's ability to do that out, especially among working class Republicans. But his main goal is to get people, as many people, young people, marginalized people, poor people, racialized people, to get to the polls and vote for something that they actually believe in. Not just to oppose something, but to champion something. And that it's Bernie Sanders that can get out the people that voted for Barack Obama in 2008 and 2012, but sat out the 2016 election to come back to the presidential ballot. And it's Bernie Sanders that can speak to people like Boots Riley who don't vote to actually participate in the process, even though they may not be fully committed to it, even though they may still have criticisms about electoral politics and the nature of, ballot-driven instead of people-driven campaigns. Nonetheless, he can unify these people in a common struggle in a way no other candidate, not Elizabeth Warren, not anybody, seems to be able to do. And Boots Riley makes a really good series of points in his Twitter thread, which is that this isn't even really just about Bernie. That even if Bernie wins the nomination, and even if Bernie wins the presidency, and even if Bernie has enough Democrats in the House and Senate to help implement a vision, it will still require systematic protest and movement and agitation from working class people individually, from civil rights movements, from young people's movements, from environmentalist movements, from labor unions, and all those movements, formal and informal, that represent working class people. They will be required to put pressure on the Congress, on the Senate, but also on Bernie himself, who will be facing immense pressure from the social and political and economic elite to moderate his message once he goes into office. And even the greatest, most honorable politicians will cave to that pressure unless they have the support and countervailing pressure from the working class, from progressives, from socialists, from the left. Boots Riley understands that. So his support for Bernie isn't even really primarily about Bernie, but about his potential and connections to broad movements. And Bernie Sanders, to his credit, has leaned into this general perception. What's one of Bernie's main slogans? Not me, us. Not just me, I'm Bernie Sanders, I'm running for president, I'm going to take the White House and do good things. It's me, I'm Bernie Sanders, I'm helping to build a movement. I'm continuing a project that started with women's movements and working class movements and civil rights movements and LGBTQ movements. And I am continuing that in a process to build a better society. And that won't stop once I become president. Bernie has often said that there's always this discourse about how the president is commander-in-chief, or they're the chief executor of American society, or they're the chief administrator of the American organization. Bernie Sanders doesn't see himself in that hierarchical vein. He more sees himself as the potential organizer-in-chief. To not just sit in the White House and dictate what the regular people want and don't want, need and don't need, should and shouldn't care about, but rather to help be a prism for those regular people to express their desires to the Senate, to the House, and to the world. Bernie Sanders will work to organize people. I've noted this on the channel lots of times, how Bernie doesn't just have rallies for himself. He'll use his membership lists. He'll use his contacts. He'll use his volunteer base to defend workers, to defend migrant peoples, to defend undocumented peoples, to use that power for immediate social gains and social protest that has nothing directly, at least, to do with his political campaign, with his effort to become the capital P president. Bernie Sanders is thus proving that this really is about the movement. So it's not going to start with Bernie, because this movement has started well before Bernie. And whether Bernie becomes president or not, or whether he has 8 years as president, and whether he goes down as the greatest president in American history or not, the movement will not end with him. The struggle will continue. And Boots Riley gets that. And I think that's why this critical endorsement is so important. Boots Riley is not rah, rah, rah Bernie, sometimes like I am. But Boots Riley, like I am, really does fundamentally believe that Bernie Sanders is only the start of the political and social and economic revolution. That Bernie Sanders' vision is just the first few steps. Those are big steps, important steps, but they're just the start of building a truly comprehensive economic and political democracy for the broad working class of the United States and of the entire world. Bernie is a key cog in that wheel, but he isn't the whole wheel. We need to remember that. And so this endorsement from Boots Riley matters for so many reasons. It matters because he's the type of person that doesn't vote but will for Bernie. And there's tens of millions of people potentially just like him. He notes that in his endorsement. And it matters because he is reminding us, in a way Bernie has, but maybe we sometimes forget in our excitement and admiration for Bernie, that it isn't just about him. It's not about Bernie. It's about all of us. And whether Bernie becomes president or not, we have to keep fighting and pushing and protesting and agitating to make things happen, and to make things happen in the interests of regular people. And so when Bernie becomes president, that's just the next day in the struggle. Thank you, Boots Riley, for the endorsement of Bernie, and thank you for reminding us that it is not the end, but the beginning of the next stage of the fight.